What is shame and how to overcome it? To understand shame, let's first read this excerpt, Mourir de dire la honte, by Boris Cyrulnik. If you want to know why I have nothing to say, you only need to understand what reduced me to silence. The circumstances of the event and the reactions of my environment are its co-authors. So I will keep silent to protect myself. I will only show on the surface the part of my story that you are capable of bearing. The other part, the dark one, will continue to live in the underground of my personality. This silent story will govern my relationships because the unspoken words, I have told them only to myself in the depths of my inner world. My silence then becomes a defense. The words are too painful, sometimes impossible to say, or unbearable to hear. Once we have read this text by Boris, a great psychiatrist who studied this subject in depth, we understand that shame is a feeling that makes us want to hide, to disappear, to no longer be among others. The narrator says that he carries a painful story within him, but chooses to remain silent. His silence is not random. It is the result of the traumatic event itself and the reactions of others, the environment that did not understand, did not support, or worsened his suffering. He affirms that he will only show one part of himself, the part others can handle. But he keeps another dark, unspeakable part, buried in the underground of his personality. This unspoken story governs his relationships because his secret history influences how he relates to others. Finally, he describes his silence as a defense strategy. Words are too painful, sometimes impossible to say, or unbearable to hear. Words are fragments of affection, but they sometimes carry too much information. Thus, silence becomes a defense strategy against the unspeakable, the impossible to say, the unbearable to hear. So if shame is this painful and harmful to the wounded, how do we overcome it? How do we get out of this black hole, out of this inner torment that rots life? Because if we do nothing, this poisonous feeling, as described by Boris Cyrulnik, can ruin us and hinder our entire existence and our relationships with others. We hide to avoid suffering. We hide to avoid shame. This is the paradox of liberation from this painful feeling, or rather, this emotion. So how do we break the silence to free ourselves from shame? To escape shame, let's first understand what not to do. Let's continue with Cyrulnik, who mentions the story of Primo Levi, a Jewish survivor of the Auschwitz camps. In his book, If This Is a Man, Primo Levi could not reframe the horror he experienced. He could not free himself from the shame of being reduced to a number, an object. We were no longer called by our names, but by a number, he said. No one wanted to listen to him, so he kept repeating the horror, the shame, and the dehumanization he endured in the concentration camps. So how can one reframe their story to be freed from shame? Let's listen to Boris Cyrulnik. Reframing one's story was the solution to escape shame and to resume the process of resilience, as Mr. Cyrulnik explains. Reframing the representation of the wounded. Cyrulnik explains, when a person experiences trauma, they cannot always speak about it immediately. The shock is too violent. The words don't yet exist to describe the horror. The environment may deny, minimize, or reject. The person remains silent. Over time, the memory of trauma stays alive but confused, raw. Reframing consists of transforming the inner experience into a narrative, giving form and coherence to what was chaos, finding words to express what was unspeakable, adapting the story to the audience. We don't say everything to everyone. We choose what others can bear. Revisiting the story multiple times. Each time the person reshapes it slightly, as if reconstructing their identity out of their wound. Reframing is the psychic and narrative work that transforms the mute wound into a livable story, preventing it from remaining a dead weight inside. The error of Primo Levi, according to Cyrulnik. Primo Levi, survivor and writer, bore witness in his books, notably If This Is a Man. But Cyrulnik says he made a tragic mistake. Levi believed that simply telling the raw truth of trauma would be enough to be freed from it. He thought that giving a direct testimony without transformation or reframing would relieve shame and preserve memory. But Cyrulnik stresses that recounting trauma without transformation risks plunging back into suffering instead of bringing relief. Levi spent his life bearing witness, but remained trapped in his trauma until he committed suicide in 1987. For Cyrulnik, Levi's error was not finding a way to restage his story in a form that allowed him to live afterward. He spoke, but did not reframe. Reframing equals transforming the unspeakable into a bearable story, reorganizing memory so that the wound is not only pain, but also a reconstructed identity. Levi's error equals believing that telling the naked truth was enough. Without reinterpretation and new meaning, words alone can crush instead of liberating. And to conclude, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this video. Like and comment if you've gone through moments of shame, and tell us in the comments if this subject interests you and if you'd like us to explore more on shame, psychology, or psychoanalysis. Thank you very much. Subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone in your circle who needs to free themselves from shame. Bye.